I never thought a sentence could echo the way that one did. You'll forget her once I'm done. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even flirtation, not really. It was something else. The kind of line that sits under your skin, quiet, patient, waiting to mean more later. I met her on a Monday that smelled like old oil and rain. The kind of day when even the sky looks tired. I was working at my uncle's repair shop, buried in the usual mess of tools and receipts, when she walked in carrying an umbrella that had lost half its shape. Her car had stalled just outside the pharmacy. She didn't fit the place. Too polished, too composed, like someone who'd come from somewhere softer. But she wasn't out of touch. She just had this way of owning silence. When she stood there, the noise of the shop dimmed a little. "You work here?" she asked. Her voice wasn't what I expected. Low, unhurried, slightly rough at the edges. It wasn't the kind of voice that asks for help. It was the kind that gives instructions. "Yeah," I said. "Mostly tune-ups and hopeless causes." She smiled, briefly, like someone remembering a private joke. Then she handed me the keys. While I worked, she waited inside, not scrolling through her phone, not talking, just watching. Not in a rude way, but like she was studying something she hadn't seen in a while. I pretended not to notice, though my hands moved slower than usual. Every few minutes, I'd catch her reflection in the shop window, the faint movement of her fingers against her sleeve, the way she adjusted her scarf as if to give her hands something to do. I thought she looked restless, not nervous, just contained, like there was more she wasn't saying. "You're quiet," she said after a while. I looked up. "You'd rather I talk?" She tilted her head, half smiling. "Depends on what you'd say." There was a pause, not long, but long enough for me to realize I had no good answer. The rain outside softened against the tin roof, and the smell of engine grease mixed with something floral from her perfume. "You remind me of someone," she said suddenly. Same way of pretending not to care. Before I could ask who, she was already looking away, reaching into her bag for something. Her hand brushed mine when she passed me a receipt. Just skin, a second of contact, but it felt too deliberate to be an accident. When I finished fixing the car, she stood beside me, close enough that I could see a faint scar near her collarbone. Her eyes lingered, not in a way that crossed lines, but in a way that suggested she knew exactly where the line was. "Thank you," she said, and her tone softened, almost reluctant. "You did more than you think." I don't know why I asked what I did next. Maybe it was her calm, maybe the quiet. "Who was it?" "The person I remind you of." She looked at me for a long second. Then, with the faintest smile, the kind that hides something heavier underneath, she said, "My stepdaughter's first mistake." She didn't wait for a reaction. She just reached out, traced a line along my jaw, a brief, feather-light touch that froze me where I stood, and whispered, almost playfully, "You'll forget her once I'm done." Then she was gone. The sound of her heels faded, the rain returned, and the shop felt colder than before. I didn't know her name until later. But that line, that impossible, unearned confidence, hasn't left my head since. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the faint trail of her finger along my jaw, like a mark I can't wash off. It had been 3 weeks since the car repair, and I told myself it was just coincidence when she walked into the shop again. This time, she wasn't dressed like she'd stepped out of someone else's world. No heels, no perfume, just jeans, a beige coat, and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept. "Battery light came on," she said simply. "Probably nothing." She avoided looking at me at first, but when she did, it was with that same composed stillness that made everything else in the room fade. I nodded, trying to sound casual. "You've been driving a lot?" Her answer came with a small, tired exhale. "Driving helps." That was all she said. I didn't ask what from. While I worked, she leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone but not really reading. Every now and then, she'd glance at me, not in curiosity, more like she was checking whether I was still there. I noticed her hands this time, long fingers, pale knuckles, the faint tremor when she reached for her coffee. She wasn't as controlled as before. There was something softer in the way she stood, like she'd stopped pretending to be untouchable. "You look tired," I said before thinking. She smiled faintly. "That's one way to say I look older." That's not what I meant. I know. A silence followed, heavier than it should have been. The only sound was the slow hum of the radiator and the soft scrape of my wrench. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, lower, almost thoughtful. You ever feel like you're too aware of yourself? Like every move, every word is being watched by someone who doesn't actually see you. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at her. The light from the window cut across her face, catching a small line at the corner of her mouth. She noticed my stare, smiled without warmth, and turned away. I shouldn't talk like that, she said. Forget I said anything. But I didn't forget. You don't forget the way someone finally sounds human after holding themselves together for too long. I wiped my hands on a rag, trying to ground myself in something ordinary. You can talk like that, I said. I won't tell anyone. She let out a quiet laugh, the first one I'd heard from her. It wasn't loud, just a quick, breathy sound that seemed to surprise even her. Careful, she said. You make it sound safe here, isn't it? Her eyes flicked up to mine. That depends on who you're trying to protect. The words hung between us, too sharp to ignore. Then she looked down, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, her sleeve sliding back enough for me to see the faint bruise on her wrist. She noticed me notice it, and the air shifted, a tiny, unspoken jolt of awareness neither of us could undo. I didn't ask. She didn't explain. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that the scent of her coat, rain and coffee, filled the space between us. Her hand brushed mine when she took back the car keys. It wasn't deliberate this time, but it felt just as heavy. Thank you, she said softly, her eyes searching mine for something I couldn't name. And before she left, she added, barely above a whisper, don't wait for me to come back. But the way she said it, quiet, unsure, like she almost wanted to be wrong, made it impossible to listen. It started raining again, not the light kind that fades, but the kind that traps you inside with your thoughts. She called that evening, said her car had stalled near the edge of town. I almost didn't pick up, but her voice, calm, composed, with something cracked underneath, left no room for hesitation. By the time I reached her, she was sitting in the driver's seat, headlights dim, hands on the wheel like she'd forgotten what to do next. The storm had turned her hair darker, strands sticking to her cheek. You shouldn't have come, she said as I opened the door. I know. She looked at me, not angry, not relieved, just tired in a way that made my chest tighten. The rain made conversation pointless, so I drove her back to her house in silence. The wipers moved in rhythm with the pulse in my jaw. She stared straight ahead, occasionally glancing at the passenger mirror, as if watching for something behind us. When we reached her driveway, she didn't move to get out. The porch light was off, the house dim except for one room upstairs, faint, golden. You can come in, she said finally. I'll make tea. The kitchen smelled like something floral and forgotten. She moved quietly, her gestures slower than usual. There was a thin crack in the wall by the window, a pile of unopened mail on the counter. You live alone? I asked. She hesitated. Not always. Her eyes dropped to the kettle as it began to hiss. I wanted to ask who used to live here, but I didn't. Instead, I noticed the small things, the chipped nail polish on her fingers, the faint tremor when she poured the tea, the way she rubbed her wrist before passing me the cup. You shouldn't get used to this, she said after a while. Used to what? This. Sitting here. Me letting you. Her voice cracked slightly on me, and she looked away as if she'd said too much. The thunder rolled closer, filling the silence. We both reached for the same napkin on the counter, our fingers brushing. She didn't pull away immediately, just stayed there, breathing through the pause. Her eyes flicked up to mine, searching for something she couldn't ask for. And then her phone rang. The sound cut through the air like glass. She stepped back instantly, nearly dropping her cup. I saw the name flash across the screen, Daniel. She stared at it without answering. The ringing stopped. She began, but didn't finish. I nodded, setting my cup down. My throat felt dry, my hands restless with words I couldn't say. Outside, the storm kept pressing against the windows. Inside, the air between us had turned too close to breathe. She stepped toward the doorway, then stopped. Her reflection caught in the window beside me. A blur of motion, a figure suspended between leaving and staying. I told myself it wouldn't happen again, she whispered, almost to herself. Then don't, I said quietly. Not if it'll hurt you. She smiled, but it wasn't from relief. It was the kind of smile people wear when they already know they're past the point of retreat. Her hand hovered near my face for half a second, almost touching, almost certain, before she dropped it and walked away. The front door clicked softly behind her, but the echo of her almost touch stayed longer than it should have. ChatGPT said, I hadn't seen her for 2 weeks after that night. I tried to convince myself it was for the best, that what almost happened didn't matter, but that lie grew heavier every day. Then she showed up again. Same beige coat, same tired poise. Only this time, she didn't come for her car. She came to talk. Walk with me, she said. It wasn't a question. We ended up by the river, the kind of place people only go when they need air but don't want to be found. The sun was fading, and the water carried the last light in uneven pieces. She stood a few steps away, arms crossed, not meeting my eyes. I shouldn't have called you that night, she began. It wasn't fair. I came because I wanted to. I know, she said quietly. That's what makes it worse. The words sat between us, raw and unpolished. She exhaled sharply, looking out over the water. I keep thinking if I stay still long enough, it'll pass, whatever this is. But it doesn't. Her voice trembled, just once, barely enough to notice. I wanted to reach for her, but something about the way she held herself stopped me. What are we doing? She asked finally. The question wasn't angry. It was scared, maybe even pleading. You're too young to be this tangled up in someone else's mess. It doesn't feel like a mess, I said. She turned then, really looked at me. That's because you haven't lived long enough to know when something beautiful is already breaking. We stood there in silence. The sound of the river filled every pause, and the evening light turned her eyes darker. I think about you, I admitted, surprising even myself. Not the way you think. It's just, I notice things. When you laugh, when you stop yourself from saying something. I don't know what to do with it. She closed her eyes for a moment, like she was absorbing the words too slowly. I notice you too, she whispered. That's what scares me. I took a step closer. The air between us felt electric, not loud, just charged in a way that made every breath feel deliberate. You don't have to be scared, I said. Yes, I do. Her voice was barely a breath now. Because you, remind me of everything I tried to forget. The last light slipped away, and we stood there half in shadow. She looked older in that moment, not in years, but in weight, like she'd been carrying the same ache for too long. I didn't say anything. I just watched her fight whatever she was holding back. Then, after a long silence, she finally said it. If you keep looking at me like that, I'm going to stop pretending I don't feel it too. She didn't wait for my response. She just turned away, her reflection flickering in the dark water, steady for a second, then gone. It was late when she texted, just a single line. If you're still awake, come by. I almost didn't. But curiosity, or maybe the kind of ache that doesn't sleep, pulled me there. Her house looked softer this time. One lamp on, the rest of the room swallowed by shadow. She was sitting on the floor, barefoot, a half-empty glass of wine beside her. No pretense, no armor, just her. I found something, she said, holding out an old phone. Didn't mean to. It just played. She pressed the button before I could ask. A voicemail filled the quiet, a woman's voice, young, shaky, laughing through tears. Mom, it's me. I know you said not to, but I miss him. I can't stop thinking about how it ended. Please don't tell him I called, okay? I needed to say it out loud. The message ended abruptly, the silence after it almost physical. She didn't look at me. That was my stepdaughter, she said finally. The one you reminded me of. I tried to speak, but the words caught somewhere between disbelief and something heavier. She loved someone she shouldn't have, she continued, her voice steady but small. Someone older. Married. She was 20. I told her to forget him. She didn't. Her fingers toyed with the wine glass, tracing the rim over and over like she needed something to move. She left 6 months later. New city, new name. I haven't seen her since. Her words fell flatly, like she'd rehearsed them too many times. I sat down beside her, careful not to touch. The voicemail still lingered in the air, faint and unfinished. So when you said, I began, but couldn't finish, that you'd forget her once I'm done? She smiled faintly, not cruelly, just with exhaustion. It was a stupid thing to say. I was angry at her, and maybe at myself. You reminded me of what I couldn't fix. The room felt smaller now, heavier with everything unsaid. You don't have to explain, I said quietly. I do, she whispered. Because if I don't, I'll start using you to rewrite something that was never yours to carry. She finally turned toward me, eyes rimmed red, lips trembling just enough to betray her calm. Do you understand now? I nodded, though I wasn't sure what part one understood. The guilt, the longing, or the fact that none of it erased the pull between us. Her gaze lingered on me, soft but distant. You were never supposed to mean anything, she said. But you do. It wasn't a confession. It was an undoing, quiet, reluctant, real. She set the phone down, the screen still glowing faintly, and leaned back against the wall. I don't know if I want you here, she said. But I don't know how to want you gone either. The words hit harder than any declaration could have. I didn't touch her, didn't move, just sat there, watching her eyes glisten in the thin light. Two quiet storms trying not to meet. Outside, the rain started again, soft and relentless, like it knew we weren't done yet. It wasn't planned, seeing her again. A week had passed since the night of the voicemail, and I'd been trying to unlearn her voice from my thoughts. But grief and gravity work the same way. You don't notice their pull until you stop resisting. She came by the shop near closing. No car, no reason, just standing there like the air outside her house had become unbreathable. You're still here, she said softly. Didn't know I was supposed to leave. Her lips parted, then closed again. There is no fight left in her tone, only something fragile, like acceptance wrapped in fatigue. I didn't mean to make a mess of things, she murmured. You didn't. She smiled faintly. Then why does it feel like everything's about to fall apart? I didn't have an answer. So I wiped my hands on a rag, turned off the light above the counter, and nodded toward the small break room in the back. It wasn't much, a flickering bulb, a dented table, the smell of machine oil, but it was quiet. She followed, sitting across from me. The hum of the old refrigerator filled the silence. I've been thinking, she said after a while, about that night, about the things I said. I waited. I told myself I saw my stepdaughter in you, she continued. But I think that was just my excuse for staying close to something I shouldn't want. She looked at me then, steady, no disguise this time. You make me feel seen, and I don't remember the last time I let anyone do that. Her honesty didn't sound like a confession. It sounded like surrender. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. You don't have to justify what you feel. She let out a breath that trembled halfway through. But I do. Because I'm supposed to be older, wiser, immune to this kind of foolishness. You're human, I said. The quiet stretched again, but it didn't hurt this time. It felt necessary, like both of us were relearning how to exist in stillness. After a long pause, she reached for her cup of coffee, fingers brushing mine. Neither of us pulled away. Her hand was cold, unsteady, but she didn't move it. I don't know what happens next, she whispered. Maybe nothing, I said. Maybe that's okay. She nodded, eyes glistening in the dull light. Maybe it is. We stayed like that, two people who had spent too long pretending not to need warmth, sitting in silence that finally felt honest. No promises, no plans, just the faint rhythm of the clock and the sound of her breathing next to mine. When she finally spoke again, her voice was almost gone. I thought love was supposed to make you forget, she said. But maybe the real thing just makes you remember differently. She leaned her forehead against my shoulder. Not a kiss, not a plea, just the quiet acknowledgement of something real. And for the first time, neither of us tried to look away. It's strange how some memories never really fade. They just quiet down until something small, like a smell or a song, brings them back in full color. It's been months since I last saw her. No calls, no messages, just space. The kind you don't fill because it deserves to stay untouched. Sometimes I drive past the old repair shop, see the same dented sign, the same flickering light in the back room. It's all still there, but it feels different now. Like the air remembers what we try to hide. People talk about love like it's supposed to be clean, beginnings, middles, ends. But this wasn't that. It was quiet, complicated, a little wrong in all the right ways. It didn't ask for anything. It just was. I learned that not every connection is meant to last forever. Some exist just long enough to wake something in you. Something you didn't know was sleeping. For me, it was the way she looked at the world. Measured, cautious, like everything was already halfway gone. Being near her taught me how to stay a little longer in my own skin, even when it hurt. And I think I gave her something too. Not love exactly, but maybe the reminder that she could still feel, that she hadn't gone completely numb. There's this one moment I still replay. Her leaning against me, forehead resting on my shoulder, no words, no music, just the sound of us breathing the same air. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't tragic. It was just human. I remember thinking, if this is all we ever get, this silence, this understanding, maybe that's enough. And it was. We didn't need promises or closure. The truth was already there, in the way she looked at me before she walked away, soft, certain, and a little free. Now, when I meet someone new, I don't compare them to her. I don't chase the same ache. I just remember that love doesn't always arrive to stay. Sometimes it visits to change you, and then it leaves quietly, trusting you'll take the lesson forward. She once said, "You'll forget her once I'm done." She was wrong. I didn't forget her. I just stopped needing to hold on so tightly. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?